As usual, this year is sponsored in memory of Elisheva, Sima bat Zalman, Elisheva Frist, and today in particular, 10th Yortzeit of one of our participants here, Hallie's father, Eliezer ben Moshe Ahron, Zichrono Livracha. 10th Yortzeit today. Was it a Shana Pshuta? This is the great question. It was a Shana Muberet, and it was Adar Rishon. There you go. So you avoided machlokas. Your father was probably somebody who avoided machloket. There you go. See? They say a story of a gentleman who comes to shul, and he put on a talit, and he's a SIDDUR, that was a lot of kavana, but tefillin he never put on. So somebody walks over to him, why don't you wear tefillin? He says, I heard it was machloket between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, and my father told me before he died, don't get embroiled in any machloket. Yeah. Last week we dealt with the issue of censorship in rabbinic writings. I mentioned that this is a story of Talmud Bavli, it's a story of Mishnah, it's a story of Rambam, it's a story of the SIDDUR. We had trouble in Europe, as if today we don't have any trouble with anybody. We had trouble in Europe with Christianity, who was engaged in forced conversions, forced baptisms. We talk about the Spanish Inquisition of 1492. So people think that there was a mass exodus from Spain, and that was not the case. Over 60% of Spanish Jewry opted to baptize, and they were safe. It was as simple as that. Last June, when I took my first and only trip to Spain, and we saw personalities. We met up with personalities in the cemeteries and other places in certain locations of Rabbanim who baptized, who were known figures. I mean, we are not household names in terms of the Rambam and the Ramban and the Rashba, but nevertheless, Rabbanim who were significant personalities, and they went over to the other side. So we're not talking about a meager few. Somehow or another, when one projects from the 15th century to the 20th century, the expansion of Spanish Jewry, I'm talking about Spanish, not North African, not Iraqi, but just Spanish Jewry per se, we know that the overall growth was minimal, was really minimal, and that was because most of the Jews actually baptized. And from the 40% who didn't baptize, some actually did baptize. They became Moranos, and underground they kept some semblance of Yiddishkeit, of Yadut. Many of them ultimately never came back. Some did come back at certain turns of their lives or family life. And there are some who are Moranos until this very day. They're not called Moranos anymore, but they're descendants of Moranos. I believe that the president of Portugal is a descendant of a Morano family. The idea of growing up and dying al Kiddush Hashem was not something that was cultivated into the children's hearts and minds, as opposed to Ashkenaz. In Europe, there was also a threat of baptism all over within the Crusades, except there, the Jewish people opted to die al Kiddush Hashem. I had a professor at Yeshiva University, Professor Agus, who had certain statistics. I know that you have to be careful with statistics. I think it was Mark Twain who said there are 3 levels of liars. There's a liar, there's a bigger liar, and then the statisticians, those who talk about statistics. Because statistics has to do with how you write the question in the form when you ask people to fill out a form for statistical information. But nevertheless, there's a certain gauge here we can use of communal books, kilota kahal, of names, and you can somehow figure out, roughly speaking, what the population was in a certain era. And we talk about the year 800, both in Spain as well as in Ashkenaz Jewry, and Ashkenaz is Germany and northern France. Southern France has a different history that's called Provence, but in northern France, pure Ashkenaz Jewry and Spain. And you take the year 800 and you get an idea of how many Jews there were at that point in Spain how many Jews were in Ashkenaz, and then take the same statistics, and here it's going to be more accurate, how many were in Europe and how many in Ashkenaz and how many were in Spain. And to determine the success of a national group, you have to check the what was and how many there are now. You can see how the growth is working. So just as a point of comparison, this professor used Britain and France. So he said if you take the Brits of 800 and compare it to 1939, they were 60 times greater. The number, whatever it was, whatever X was at a year's 800, it was 60 times greater in 1939. And I say 39 before the Shoah, because that obviously upsets the whole statistics. And if you take the Franks, who become the French people, it was times 40. Whatever the X was at year 800, at 1939, it was times 40. Spanish Jewry, whatever the X was at year 800, it was times 4. It grew 4 times, and that's it. 4 times. And of course, the only explanation to that is that most of Spanish Jewry either baptized and they were lost to the people, so no longer, and including add on the Marranos, and of course then the expulsion, and those who were killed. So you don't have that many Spanish Jews who actually survive as Spanish Jews per se in 1939. Whereas Ashkenaz, here we have numbers that there were about 5,000 Ashkenazi Jews in the year 800, and there were 12 million in 1939. That means it grew 2,000 times. So Spanish Jewry grew 4 times. The same equivalent time framework, Ashkenazi Jews grew 2,000 times. And the conclusion of this professor was that even though you think this is like weird, that you have so many people who were murdered in the Crusades, and in the Crusades, of course, and the various other pogroms throughout the ages before the Shoah, nevertheless, the growth of Am Yisrael in this area was absolutely astonishing, and it went way beyond, nothing even close to the Brits and the Franks, who had great numbers. 60, 40, this was times 2,000. It was unbelievable. And somehow the inculcation of Kiddush Hashem was such on the levels of even children that they understood that you die for Kiddush Hashem. As simple as that, and there was no baptism, very little baptism at the time. I think the only time there was a major problem of Jewish people who were baptized, and that's when children were given over in 1939, 40, to non-Jewish families, Christian Catholic families in Poland for safekeeping. Just yesterday, I was at a shiva and I heard about a story of a mother. Somebody was sitting shiva for her mother, an aged mother, who at age 14 was put in a convent, and she kind of liked it. She was given good accommodations and so on, and it was very difficult to convince her after the war to come back to the Jewish people, even though she had no family, but there were people, other extended family, willing to take her in here in Israel. Then it was Palestine, but not so simple. And of course, the most famous one became the Cardinal of Paris, right, Listiger. So this was a big issue. Rav Herzog Zatzal, he ran around to the various convents, was saying Shema Yisrael to see if he got a twitch from somebody. So this was a big issue with Christianity. Then what happened was the church would actually take people who did baptize, who were mishumadim, and bring them to Vatican, and as they ransacked Jewish communities and took Jewish svarim, manuscripts, and later print to the Vatican, so these Jews, they were essentially Talmidei Chachamim, but now they're baptized. And they're trying to underline and highlight those problematic sections or lines or words that would insult the church, and that would be an invitation for another pogrom. So we had no other recourse but to internally censor some of our material. So if you take, for example, Aleinu L'Shabeach, I grew up with a SIDDUR in the United States, nice SIDDUR, Hebrew Publishing Company, remember that one from 1913, 1918, whatever. The Birnbaum SIDDUR, and they had these one beautiful SIDDURim that are right in the archives, and no shul uses them, hardly a shul. So there, Aleinu Shabeach, v'anachnu korim mishtachavim modim. They ask every kid who got up for Enkel Lekenu, v'anachnu korim mishtachavim modim. doesn't fit in with the niggin. Shehem mishtachavim lehevel varik umitpalalim el lo yoshia. They bow down to narishkeit, to nothing. And so this was not part of the Siddur for hundreds of years in Ashkenaz. The Sephardim all had it, because there was no problem of Christianity in North Africa and in Yemen. So there was no need to censor anything. But here in Eretz Yisrael, finally, we can be free. If anybody read the Rav's great speech, Kol Dodi Dofek, it was his Yom Ha'atzmaut speech at Yeshiva University in 1956, where he talks about hearing God's knocking Kol Dodi Dofek 6 times, and one of them was the theological knock. It says the establishment of the State of Israel was a real thorn in Christian theology, because they believed that even if you have a benign type of relationship with the Jewish people, and not aggressive, and not out to kill them, and to create the lowest status, civil status for them, as was done throughout Jewish history. But nevertheless, in eternal damnation, the Jewish people will never return home. They'll be in Galut forever. And that was the last line of defense of the Catholic Church. And all of a sudden comes the State of Israel and shatters it, literally shatters it. And that's why until 1992, the Catholic Church and the Vatican did not have diplomatic ties with Israel. And the only thing that changed it was happened in 1992, was the Oslo agreements, and that's already a political speech. Why the Catholic Church? It wasn't that they did tshuva, believe me. It had nothing to do with that at all. It just had to be on the right side of the table in order to negotiate for the future status of Yerushalayim. But the idea that here in Eretz Yisrael we can put everything back. So in the SIDDUR it was put back. In America they still printed Shehem Mishtachavim Leheverik with brackets. So some people, if they're not comfortable with it, so I know that parenthesis means take out. Brackets actually means put in. And that's what the princes were doing. They were saying, put this in. So why didn't they just put it in without the brackets? Because they realized that there was Siddurim that didn't have it. So they put it in such a manner that you should insert. Shehem mishtachavim leheva varik umitpalalim el lo yoshia. You're praying to a God that's not going to help you. But here in Eretz Yisrael, all the Siddurim are just printed properly and correctly. You take the Talmud Bavli. So I have a book home. It's called Chesronot HaShas, that which is missing from the printed Shas Vilna. What's missing from the printed Shas Vilna? All the deletions because of the internal censor. So you have all kinds of Midrashei Chazal about Yeshu, Yud Shin Vav, Yeshu. So that's not a good thing. To have a medrash about Yeshu in the Gemara, they took it out. Sometimes they didn't take it out. They simply took the Yud and changed it to an Ayin, and now it reads Ayin Samach Vav from Yud Shin Vav, and that's Esav. Oh, Esav, that's okay. That's a fair game to talk about Esav. And there are Midrashei Chazal in the end of Masechet Sanhedrin about Esav. So who's Esav? So we know who Esav. There was an oral tradition who Esav. Esav is, the pastor, the priest down the block. That's Esav, and so on. But we never printed Yeshu anymore. There's even a very important section in the Rambam, the end of the 11th chapter of the Laws of Monarchy, Ilchot Malachim, that's been entirely censored out. There, the Rambam actually has a type of good word to say about both Christianity and Islam. He says that Christianity and Islam moved the Gentile world from pure paganism to pure monotheism in stages. He says Am Yisrael does it overnight at Har Sinai, where we were B'nai Noach before Har Sinai, and now we're believers of Anoch Hashem Elokecha. But the nations of the world, it actually takes some time. So the Rambam says Christianity slower than Islam. Islam is monotheism. The Rambam believes that it's a monotheistic religion. Obviously, Islam is not Judaism. They did a lot of corruptions in their understanding of Judaism. One being that Muhammad is a prophet. Obviously, that's narishkeit from our point of view. So that's Islam, but it's monotheistic. But Christianity, not according to the Rambam, not yet monotheistic. The Rambam believes that the Trinity, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, the Av Ben Ruach HaKodesh, means that there's a split in terms of the understanding of divinity. And according to the Rambam, that's already smells from idolatry. It's not pure idolatry. Rambam agrees it's not pure idolatry. It's something. And it's in the right direction, he said, because the Navi Zechariah says, and this is probably the most famous pasuk in the whole Siddur, Vaya Hashem lemelech hakol haaretz, because we have 1 foot out already. There's some people call Aleinu l'shabeach tfilat haderech, because you have 1 foot out. Vaya Hashem lemelech hakol haaretz, vayamahu Hashem echad shmo echad. One day God's going to be acclaimed by all. So Rambam says the Islam and the Christianity, they're going to come around. But in the meantime, they didn't come around yet. So it's on the one hand complementary. Some people think a little bit too complimentary. The Rambam went a little bit too far. I mean, he even says that, we suffered from Islam and Christianity. So but let's just try to be objective for a second, put all that suffering and pain on the side, and let's just talk a moment objectively. That he says there's a half a good word about Christianity and Islam. But it wasn't good enough. There was fear that Christianity is not good enough. It's not even as good as the Islam. Let's get it out of the text. So it just wasn't there. So most people who own a standard Rambam, and I talk about standard Rambam today, a standard Rambam is the photo offset of the Vilna Varsha print of the Rambam, which was censored. And I say 95% of people in the world who own a set of Rambam have such a set of Rambam. 5% have invested in either the Shabtai Frankel edition, Rav Kapach's edition, Rav Nochem Rabinowitz's edition, Rav Shilat's edition. There are all kinds of new, updated editions. Even the Rambam La'am, which is a popular version of Rambam here in Eretz Yisrael, they already put it back in. Because they here in Medinat Yisrael, we figured out that there were deletions. How did we figure it out? Rav Kapach brings a schlep of manuscripts from Yemen, and he says, hey, guess what? You're missing 16 lines here, from the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. Let's put it back in. And already in the Rambam La'am, they put it back in, and all the others put it back in. And all the other comparisons to Rambam, we discovered in 1956. We discovered a whole manuscript of that the Rambam himself edits of the first 2 of the 14 books of Mishnah Torah, as if he had nothing else to do in life. They send him from Chalab, from Aleppo, an envelope, azoi, of a whole package, and he's willing to sit down and go over word by word and make corrections and sign it with a date. And that, you want to see it? Take a trip to Cambridge. You don't have to go to Cambridge. Just get online. You'll see it. You can see it, mamish. You go into the Friedberg Geniza project and you get to see it. You don't have to travel anymore to Cambridge, even though I wouldn't mind seeing it, actually. They had, I saw a part of it, by the way. There was an exhibit. It closes this Thursday. So if you want to rush, you have to get to the Yeshiva University exhibit this coming Thursday. It was supposed to close the end of December. Because of its popularity, they did a Rambam exhibit in the YU Museum, and they extended it for 2 months. So they said, that's it, February 29th, it's closing. So, and they brought over some of the Rambam's writings. So part of this Rambam from this edition that I'm talking about was actually there. So, and I saw this exhibit twice in the last year. So you can get your finger, you can see it. So from these manuscripts, we can now update the SIDDUR and update the Gemara and update the Rambams. I mean, it's just unbelievable. The Rambam wrote in the Bracha V'la Malshinim Al Titikva. So we know that's an add-on. Chazal, Anshe Knesset Gdola, instituted 18 brachot of Shmon Esrei, and it became a generic name, Shmon Esrei. Even if you daven on Shabbat, with only 7 brachot, we call it Shmon Esrei. Like you take a Kleenex, and it can be not a Kleenex, but it's a tissue. But you call it a Kleenex or drink cola and call it Coke. I mean, that's the way we are. You use sometimes generic names, like Frigidaire. Remember Frigidaire? I mean, Frigidaire is a name of a brand. So instead of, struggling to say the word refrigerator, that's a long word. So you say Frigidaire, fridge. So the Rambam said, V'la mishumadim al ti tikva. That was the original, the mishumadim, shmad, those who converted. It was against the early Hebrew Christians. Some had the phrase minim, because Chazal used the word minim already, and it could be that the word minim may have already been a censored word. But okay, it's pretty authoritative going all the way back. All the manuscripts have minim. And they called the early Hebrew Christians the minim. So, but then it was changed to malshinim. Malshinim means people who snitch on others. But that was done to somehow sanitize the word mishumadim. That's all. and it was taken out. But the Rambam's view, words in the Mishnah Torah, in the manuscript, is La Mishumadim Al Tihi Tikva. That whole bracha went through its more changes in Nusach than any other bracha in all of the Shemona Esrei because of the problem of censorship. So here and there, this word was taken out, this word was changed, and so on. But as a corollary to this problem of censorship, how do we say in Keladon, in Keladon, we have Keladon. פר וכבוד נותנים לשמו, צהלה ורינו לזרם אגודוי, קרא לשמש ויזכר, רע והתקין צורת הלבנה. Now before that is מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה, נאה זיוום בכל העולם, שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם, עושים באימה רצון קונם. I had a guy in my shul in Astoria. Oisim behema ritzon koinam. Oisim behema. Okay, and everybody used to go behema. Be'ema, with fear, with ema. Osim be'ema. This is the celestial bodies. What does it mean, ritzon konam? What does that mean? Let's translate it. Ritzon. Osim be'ema. Meleim ziv umefikim Noga. Yeah, and these celestial bodies give off the shine and the radiance. Na'ezivam b'chol olam. They give light to the whole world. Smechim b'tzeitam b'sasim b'vo'am. They themselves, as if, this is a Kabbalistic idea, that these celestial bodies have a neshama, that they themselves are joyful, that they're able to do the will of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Osim be'ema ritzon konam, the will of their creator. Okay, Ritzon Konam, their creator, in singular, creator. Why do I say this? Because Ritzon Konam is it's actually a correction of the censorship. What was the original word? Ritzon Konehem. Now what does Konehem mean? We have it in the SIDDUR, but Keladon is just once a week for Shabbat. But in Titbarech Tzureinu Malkeinu, Kulam Ovim, Kulam Burim, Kulam Kedoshim, Kulam Osim Be'ema Uviyir'a Ritzon Konam. There are certain Siddurim that have replaced the word Konam with Konehem, going back to the original Girsa. And so too in Kiddush Levana, Sasim V'Simcha Usmeichim La'asot Ritzon Konam, and in some Siddurim it says La'asot Ritzon Konehem. What is the difference between konehem and konam? Pay attention. Konehem, kuf nun vav, kuf vav nun, kone, hey mem. Is there a yud or is there no yud? Kuf vav nun, hey mem, or kuf vav nun, yud hey mem. What's the difference? What's the difference in konehem and konehem? There's no difference in pronunciation. If there's no yud, it means their creator. Why is it their hem? Because you're talking about several celestial bodies. You're talking about the sun and the moon and the stars. But who is the creator is one. So it's konehem without a yud. It means their sasim usmechim, or let's say in the Kiddush Levana, sasim usmechim lasot ritzon konehem. Konehem is their creator with singular. Their creator with singular. If it has a yud, konehem, it means their creators. 1 second. How many creators are there? How many creators are there? So Rav Daniel Shperva, Rav Professor Daniel Shperva, who is a Chatan Pras Yisrael, he's a Rav in Yerushalayim, and he's a retired rabbi already, but he was a great professor at Bar Ilan University for many years, and specializing in the area of the development of Minhag Yisrael. He published 8 volumes on the subject, on Minhag Yisrael. And he put out a book in English about the liturgical changes in the SIDDUR. And he has a chapter there about censorship. And he uses as an example this business of konehem. And he takes us back to the first bracha of Shmona Esrei. And there, I believe I mentioned this at the beginning of the shir last week, where it says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu, Elokei Avotenu, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. So that page out of Moshe Rabbeinu from Parshat Shmot, where there it says, Elokeinu, Elokei Avotam, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Chazal just took the Avotam and made it Elokeinu, but it's the same idea, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. And then comes another page out of Moshe Rabbeinu, Hakel HaGadol HaGibor VaNorah, right out of Moshe Rabbeinu, Parshat Ekev. Kel Elyon, Konei Shamayim Va'aretz, page out of Avram Avinu. But the Konei Shamayim Va'aretz gave the people, the greats in Europe, trouble. Why? Because there was a medrash that said on Konei Shamayim Va'aretz that it reflected upon Avram Avinu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was so happy with Avram Avinu that he makes Avram Avinu a partner in the reason that the world was created, and therefore Avraham Avinu has shares in the stock market sense, shares in the created world. So Konei Shamayim Va'aretz in the Midrash, and that pasuk in Parshat Lech Lecha is Avraham Avinu, which means it's least suggestive that there are more than one creator. There are creators. And this already plays into Christian thought of the Trinity. You know, why are you telling us a story, one God? You also believe in the visibility of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We say it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu and it's Yeshu. You say it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu and it's Avram Avinu. I mean, what's the difference? It's just like a name change, that's all. But the theological implication of the visibility of God, it was very troubling. So they took the Konei Shamayim Va'aretz and they replaced it with Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol. Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol. First of all, the Gomel Chasadim Tovim was thrown in there as a decoy that they changed the Konei Shamayim Va'aretz. And it became Konei Hakol. Konei Hakol means God owns everything. So he is the El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, in singular. He's the one who meets out the Chesed, and he owns everything. Fine, Konei Hakol. And that's how we say it. But the phrase Kel Elyon, Hakel HaGadol HaGibor VaNorah, Kel Elyon, Konei Shamayim Va'aretz remained in two locations in the Siddur that apparently was not problematic because the censors didn't always come to shul Friday night. To the Christians rather, those who were going to snitch, which probably never came Friday night to davening, so they never heard that in the Bracha Achat Me'en Sheva, we have like a quasi Chazarat Hashatz after Ma'ariv on Friday night. So there is Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu, Elokei Avotenu, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, Hakel HaGadol HaGibor VaNorah, El Elyon, Konei Shamayim Va'aretz, before we say Magan Avot Bidvaro Mechayim Mitim. So that's still there. And as I mentioned last week, in Nishmat Kol Chai, it's also there. In Nishmat Kol Chai, also, the people who would come and check out on the Siddur, they didn't come early to daven. They were latecomers. So in Nishmat, we got away with it. And so on. So it never was changed over there. But in Shmona Esrei, it's 3 times a day. There we were looking for trouble. So it was changed to Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol. So Rav Shperva says the same concept hit with the word Koneihem. So originally it was Koneihem without a Yud, and it meant the celestial bodies, Ritzon Koneihem. There, because it's more than one celestial body, Koneihem, creator in singular. So it was without a Yud. But then some Seifrim, by accident, put in a Yud, because they thought that's how it's supposed to be spelled. That's all. They thought the last cipher was a dummy. He missed the Yud, like I'm going to do a favor. And they realized there's going to be trouble here, so they took the word out completely and put in the word konam. And this is verifiable now in manuscripts. It's not a conjecture and so on. So if you take, for example, the Rambam, look at source number 7, those who have the page. In source number 8, it says, Haroel levana b'chidusha. If you see the new moon, and it's a new moon, so you're supposed to say a bracha. This is what we call Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana, right? So it says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher b'maro bara shchakim u'v'ruach piv kol tzva'am, chok u'zman natan lahem, shelo yishanu et tafkidam, sasim u'smechim la'asot ritzon koneihem. That's not now a siddur. Now, why did I bring this? If I have it on this page, it's taken off the Project Hashut, the Bar Ilan responsa literature, who already used an updated, corrected version of the Rambam, but the only thing is, they only corrected it up until a point. They still made a mistake. They printed Konehem with a Yud. In the original Rambam, the Konehem does not have a Yud. In the printed Rambams that many of us have, it says Konam, Ritzon Konam. It has the censored word Konam. Also in the Rambam's Tfilah, the Rambam has like a SIDDUR at the end of the Tfilah, and he also has Konam in the print, which is the censored version. And why do I say that? Because I have a whole chapter in my book about Nusach Ashkenaz that inadvertently found its way into the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. And we talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago with regard to Birkat HaTorah. Is it Ha'arevna Hashem Elokeinu or V'Ha'arevna Hashem Elokeinu? Which is it? Is it Hamalamei Torah L'Amo Yisrael or is it Notena Torah? Nusach Ashkenaz crept into the prints of the Rambam, and this was not a censorship issue. This was a movement from manuscript to typesetting in Europe, how mistakes were made. And Ashkenazi texts, Sephardi texts, were corrupted in Ashkenazi printing houses, in European printing houses. This is something I heard from the Rav Son, Professor Chaim Soloveitchik, 52 years ago in a lecture at Hebrew University. And I took it and I employed it with the Rambam, and I discovered that there are numerous examples of where inadvertently Nusach Ashkenaz was printed in the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. So if you take a look at source number 6, so this is not something we didn't talk about, under the chuppah. So, they're going to honor you to be the Masada Kiddushin. Okay, so Rabbi Safran was a Masada Kiddushin more than once, I'm sure. That I don't know how many people had the schut of being a Masada Kiddushin. I don't know how many people had the schut of being Masada Kiddushin for all their 6 children. That's a tremendous schut, without a doubt. Rav Lichtenstein also was Masada Kiddushin for all his children. But the Nusach of Masada Kiddushin, right before the ring is given, so there's a Bar Pergafen, and then there's Asher Kirshanu in source number 6. It's Asher Kirshanu Masafas Yivanu al Arayot ve'asal lanu et harusot v'itir lanu et hanusot lanu al yedei chupa v'kiddushin Baruch Ata Hashem Mekadesh Amo Yisrael al yedei chupa v'kiddushin. All right, so then you give the chassan to drink a little bit, and the minhag is that the kala gives the mother of the kala gives the kala a little bit to drink. That's done so that at the end of the Sheva Brachas, you move the mother-in-law out of the picture, and the chassan gives his wife already to drink, and the mother-in-law gets the picture that she's now out of the picture. It's very, very, as they say, bolet, very, very obvious that that's what happens. Okay, Mekadesh Amo Yisrael Aydei Chupa V'Kiddushin. Well, guess what? The Rambam's version is Baruch Ata Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael. That's his version, Mekadesh Yisrael. Yet, when I have here a quote from source number 5, but Keitzad, but Mevarech, Beit Aleph Yud, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Me'olam, She'er Kishanu Masaf Sivanu V'Dilanu Ad Merayot, V'Asal Lanu Et Harusot, V'Itel Lanu Et Harusot, Al Yedei Chupa V'Kiddushin, Baruch Ata Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael. That's the way the Rambam has it. Zuhi Birkat Erusin. And that is correct. That was the Rambam's version in the manuscripts, and that's why it was updated in the Project Hashut of Bar Ilan, and that's how I have it on the page. But if you look at source number 6, it says, Anu Noagim. Who is the Hagaot Ma'ameniyot? I mentioned this already 4 weeks ago. Who is the Hagaot Ma'ameniyot? He's the nephew of Rabbi Meir ben Baruch Maram Rutenberg. He also, unfortunately, perished in a pogrom of 1298 in Rindfleisch in Germany. What he does to the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, he updates it for Ashkenazi consumption. Very similar to what Moshe Isserles, the Ramah, does to Rabbi Yosef Karo Shulchan Aruch. He makes it Ashkenazi friendly. So the Hagaot Ma'ameniyot, going through the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, the Sephardi, but you're an Ashkenazi. So you just want to make sure that you have it right in terms of your minhag. So the Hagaot Mamaniot makes notes, but we do it differently. The great example is reading the Megillah. So the Rambam writes that there's a Shechianu at nighttime, and there's no Shechianu at the Megillah in the morning. And the Hagaot Mamaniot quotes his own Rabbi, Rabbi Maram Rutenberg, and his uncle, and he says, but we repeat the Shechianu in the morning. So right away, if you're studying Mishneh Torah of the Rambam, and you're an Ashkenazi, you don't assume that what the Rambam is saying is Ashkenazi custom as well. Hagaot Mamaniot, you always have to just drop down and take a peek. And sometimes you need reading glasses because it's very small print, but you can read it. So what does the Hagaot Mamaniot say here on source number 6? Anu Nagim, our custom is lachtom, to finish the bracha, mikadesh amo Yisrael al yidei chuppah v'kiddushim. And then he has, in parentheses, in brackets, he writes, V'chein katav harosh, Rabbi Asher ben Yechiel, nagu ha'idna. Today it is customary lomar, mikadesh Yisrael al yidei chuppah v'kiddushin. Why does the Rosh say, who is the Rosh? Who is Rabbi Asher ben Yechiel? Ashkenazi or Sephardi? Let's take a vote. The Rosh. The Rosh is the father of the one who's going to write the Torah, Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher, who's the forerunner of Shulchan Aruch. The forerunner of Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is actually based on the prototype called the Torah, where for the first time all of halacha is divided into 4 units. There's Zra'im, agricultural mitzvot, but it also includes Masechet Brachot of davenings, and then there's Moed, which is Shabbat and Chagim, and then there's Nashim, anything you want to know about marriage, divorce, and everything else, and then there's civil law, the Zikin, damages. So that's really what the Shulchan Aruch is all about. There's nothing there about Beit HaMikdash, because this was put together in the Middle Ages, and they weren't concerned with the laws of Beit HaMikdash at the time. So the Torah, Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher, writes this great compendium. It's very encyclopedic in nature, and he brings things down to the bottom line, the tachlis, what's the halacha. The great work that was written on the Torah was Rabbi Yosef Karo's Beit Yosef. Today, when you say Beit Yosef, you think of the hashgacha on burgers bars. But, right? But the Beit Yosef was the great work of Rabbi Yosef Karo. And Rabbi Yosef Karo, wrote a digest of his own Beit Yosef for Balabatim, for people like us, all of us, who really don't have time, the patience and knowledge and everything to go through the Beit Yosef. So he puts it on a silver platter, and he calls the silver platter Shulchan Aruch, the prepared table. That's what he does. The prepared table, it's for simpletons like us. So that's the Shulchan Aruch. But if you really want to go through Rabbi Yosef Karo, go through the Beit Yosef. If you would meet Rabbi Yosef Karo and give him a big Yashar Kayach for the Shulchan Aruch, he must probably be insulted. For the Shulchan Aruch, you give him Yashar Kayach. What about the Beit Yosef? So Beit Yosef was written on the Torah. The Torah is the son of Rabbi Asher ben Yechiel. So were they Sephardim or Ashkenazim? So the answer is both. How could that be both? But they were born in France. And the Rosh, Rabbi Asher ben Yechiel, was educated by the last of the authors of the Tosfot. So the Tosfot are class A, thoroughbred Ashkenazim. The Rosh writes a book, Chidushim, on the Shas that smells like Tosfot. It's the same topics, the same style, everything. It's printed in the back of the Gemara, but it's readily available to all, the Chidushei HaRosh on Shas, and it's there. And you see that he's picking up from Tosfot and dealing with it and so on. He migrates to Toledo, to Spain, and he becomes a rabbi in Spain. Now, we've had scenarios of people from different ethnic origins serving as rabbinic leaders, right? People familiar with Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik at the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue in Manhattan know the thing. But I always refer to the Chacham Tzvi, the father of Rebecca Vemden, who was also a thoroughbred Yekka, a German Jew, and he becomes the Rav of the Sephardi community of Amsterdam. That's why he was Chacham Tzvi. These things happened. There was a Rabbi Zvulun Lieberman in Ocean Parkway, who's the rabbi of the Syrian shul, and so on. So this happens. Sometimes the community doesn't have its own, so they borrow from some other community, a rabbi, until they develop and cultivate their own. The Syrian Jewish community in Dill, New Jersey, has somebody who's from the Chalabi Syrian Jewish community as their rabbi. So it happens, it develops. So here, the Rosh comes from France, Ashkenaz, and he comes to Toledo, and he starts deciding halacha for the Toledan Jewish community like a Sephardi. And he writes responsa like a Sephardi. So he really adjusts and accommodates his Piskei Halacha. So he's like a hybrid. He's Ashkenazi when he talks about the explanations of Gemara, and he's a Sephardi when it comes to Posek Halacha. And he's the father of the TORAH. So the TORAH he grew up as a hybrid. So he has this Sephardi idea, and he's got the Ashkenazi idea, and that left Rabbi Yosef Karo to start sifting out and make it into a more Sephardi type of a book, the Shulchan Aruch. So then the Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Ramah, Ashkenizes it for Ashkenazi people. But the Hagaot Maimoniot, so the Rosh rather, he knows that in Ashkenaz, the end of the bracha was Mekadesh Amo Yisrael Aidei Chupa V'Kiddushin. Comes to Spain, he sees that it's done otherwise, but apparently that Ashkenazi minhag of expanding the ending of the bracha under the chuppah was adopted by the Sephardim as well. So that's why the Rosh writes, Nagu ha'idna, today. You know why he says today? Because yesterday in Toledo they didn't do it this way, but now they've come around and they have adopted the Nusach Ashkenaz. Lomar Mekadesh Yisrael al Yedei Chupa V'Kiddushin. We've added Mekadesh Amo Yisrael al Yedei Chupa V'Kiddushin. But in the Rambam's text, as we see in source number 5, was Baruch Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael. That's all it was. Yet we can go through old prints of the Rambam that were printed in Europe. And guess what? It's printed Mekadesh Amo Yisrael Ayedei Chupa V'Kiddushin, which means they printed Nusach Ashkenaz into the text of the Rambam. Dafke, in this specific case, somehow or another, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Vilna Varsha already had it right. But there are earlier Rambam prints that were impacted by all these printing changes in the 16th century when it moved from manuscript to print, and it already has Mekadesh Amo Yisrael. It still has. It was changed from Mekadesh Yisrael to Mekadesh Amo Yisrael Ayedei Chupa V'Kiddushin. By the way, what does it mean? Mekadesh Amo Yisrael Al Yedei Chupa V'Kiddushin. There are many poskim who pointed out the order is wrong. It should be Ayedei Kiddushin V'Chupa. What comes first? Remember who's on first, right? Famous Marchon. Who's on first? What comes first? What, the Kiddushin or the Chuppah? So, the Chuppah is there, but you don't need a Chuppah for the Kiddushin. What is the Chuppah, by the way? Don't tell me it's a canopy. What is the Chuppah? The halachic Chuppah. Anybody want to define to me what the halachic Chuppah is? Halachic Chuppah means entering into the common domain of husband and wife. The common domain. So in Ashkenaz, you know what the common domain was? The Yichud room. The Yichud room, which played a role as if it was the new domicile, the new home of the Chatan and Kala, and that's where Ashkenazim put two witnesses. A lot of people don't even see this, because after the chuppah, Mazda, and you go eat, right? Right? Then, of course, the photographer. How long do you have to stay in the Chele Yichud? So there are different opinions on it. Who's the poisek? The photographer, right? The photographer is the poisek. He wants to get them out as soon as they can. So some say you need 9 minutes, and some say 4 minutes, and some say but they have 2 minutes. But so you need the Chede Yichud. The Sephardim have no Chede Yichud. And I always tell Sephardi couples, go into Yichud anyway and run away from the crowd for a few minutes. It is healthy. Yichud is a very healthy component for the young couple. Very, very healthy component. So fine, Barvad Yosef writes, no, don't do Yichud because it's going to indicate that you've become Ashkenazim, lo yaleinu, and don't do it. He makes a fight not to have the Chazan Kala go into a Ched Yichud. And if you do, certainly not to have witnesses there. So how can you have Yichud by the Sephardim if there are no witnesses? You're going to have two guys come and escort the Chassan Kala to their new apartment or to some hotel room or wherever it is. You're not going to do that. So there's a concept in halacha called Anan Sahadi. We're all witnesses, but everybody knows that they're going to go into a room and close the door. You don't have to have formally two people to attest to that fact. But Ashkenazim didn't buy that necessarily, and therefore we have the symbolic Knisa l'Rishut, going into the private domicile, but with two witnesses outside. And I always tell the two witnesses outside, when the time is up, just knock on the door and walk away. they can stay in as long as they want. They don't have to come out. Just let them know that the time's up, and that's it. They're on their own now. Fine. And you have to also make sure that they're a kosher witness. I can tell you that as a Masada Kedushin, it is more important to check out the Eidim than who's going to be Masada Kedushin and who's going to be say brachot under the chuppah. I couldn't care less who says brachot under the chuppah, but the Eidim have to be Eidim ksherim. And I heard this once from Rabbi Lau Senior, who once was at a wedding. He did a wedding for the foreign minister of Israel, Abba Ibn's son or daughter, whatever. And Rav Lau was a high-profile rabbi. And Abba Ibn invites a writer, Chaim Guri, to be one of the witnesses under the chuppah. The man was not a Shomer Shabbos. And Rav Lau realized that this is going to be a diplomatic crisis. What do? The whole news media is going to know that Rav Lau disqualified a person who was very famous. So Rav Lau goes over to Chaim Guri, says, Chaim, listen, tell Abba Ibn, tell Abba, you don't want to, thank you very much for the covet, but if there's going to be a problem with this wedding and they're going to drag you into a Beit Mishpat, a Beit Din, you don't need this headache. Just bow out, and that's it. Hold the chuppah. That's a very nice kavod. Be one of the people to hold the 4 poles of the chuppah. I'm telling you, that's a great kavod. And Chaim said, Todah Rabba, Rav, that was really, you bailed me out, you saved me. And I heard that story, and guess what? I had the same story later in life, obviously. And I used to ask the Chatan, tell me about the Eidim who you would like. If I don't know the Eidim, are they Shomer Shabbat? I'm going to interrogate them anyway, but just tell me who they are. Yeah, the Shomer Shabbos. So I asked one of the Eidim, Shomer Shabbat. He says, Lifamim, once in a while. I said, Lifamim, once a week, once a month? I mean, what's... So I finally get out of him that he's not 100% a Shomer Shabbos. So I told him also, you know what? You can hold the pole of the chuppah. And it worked. It actually worked, The SadduR. You have to be careful of who are the Masada Kedushin. When one of my sons got married, so one of the Eidim was his Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Chaim Druckman, Zechron Levracha. Rav Druckman, known Rosh Yeshiva and everything. And in front of his Talmidim at the Chosin's table, I said, V'arav Masada Shomer Shabbat. So everybody laughed, everybody thought it was funny, and Rav Druckman played along with me. He knew what I was doing. It was an educational thing to teach the other guys. He goes, Utzodeg. He's right, you have to ask, So why do I say this? Because once, you don't have to have the same Eidim at the Yichud room. It can be another 2 people. You want to honor 2 people to sign the Ketubah, 2 people to be under the Chuppah, 2 people for the Yichud, but it has to be kosher Eidim. So I asked, okay, there's the yeshiva bachrim with black hats and everything. I said, you're Shomer Shabbat, okay, and you're related to the Chatan, you're related to the Kala? No, you're related to each other? No. And then as an afterthought, a guy says, our 2 wives are sisters. I said, Rabbeinu Shalom, your 2 wives are sisters, so I can only use one of you. You guys are brothers-in-law. You're puzzled. One of you are puzzled. I don't care who, but one of you is puzzled. How can you do that? What? You're sitting in a koilel? You didn't know? Which Gemara did you learn? Uktzin. I mean, what did you learn? You didn't learn. I was really upset because had somebody pointed this out to me in the video afterwards, because Hayud Dvarim Ma'olam, people have seen videos of weddings and said, how could these 2 people be wedding? They're first cousins. How could they be the Eidim? And then you have to drag the Chasam Kala back to the Rabbanut and do a Kedushin again. It's not, it's not it's a little sympathy, as they say. It's not a nice thing to do. So you have to make sure that they're kosher, and even for the Yichud, and that's like very, very important. So you have here, the chuppah is the Yichud, and the reason that we have a chuppah is a symbolic room. So you have a roof, you have 4 poles, and the Kala builds the walls. You want 7 walls so it doesn't fall down like Yericha. By Yericha it fell down. Here she's going around 7 times and building it up. That's why you have the mother and the mother-in-law help out with the going around, So, Beseda, so she's building up the bayit. There's a Mishnah in Masechet Yoma at the beginning. V'chiper ba'ado va'ad beito zu ishto. So she's going to keep up the bayit. So that's a symbolic chuppah we do. But the chuppah is there, and it's for the purpose of the Sheva brachot under the chuppah. That's where there's a nisuin. But the kiddushin, that can be done, in Times Square. It can be anywhere, You don't need a house. So why do we say al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin? So there were some who changed the version. Al yedei chuppah, not a vav, but a vet, a bet with a dagesh. V'kiddushin, but it's like b'kiddushin. Through the medium of kiddushin, then we can put up the chuppah. So it's really kiddushin and then chuppah. But we say it, adei chuppah v'kiddushin, but it's a vet. It's not a vav. It's not and kiddushin, and it is through kiddushin, b'kiddushin, adei chuppah. So why it doesn't have a dagesh? Because it has a hey before that. So grammatically it loses the dagesh. And that's why when people would know adei chuppah v'kiddushin, so when they transcribed it, they put a vav. Very simple. But it was really a bet, adei chuppah b'kiddushin, with kiddushin, through kiddushin. Some say that the proof that the fact that it's Aidei Chuppah v'Kiddushin means that there's something of a chuppah before the Kiddushin, and it's the minhag of Badeken, of covering the kala. That is for sure something done before the chuppah. Now that's a minhag that was done based on Parshat Chayei Sarah with regard to Rivka and Yitzchak, that when she comes off the Gamal, she covers. So you see that before they're getting kiddushin, before they're going to get married, so she already covers her face and her hair and so on, and that's done as a minhag, as a type of gesture. But some say it's not such a minhag; it's a din, it's a halakha of chuppah, that's the real chuppah. And those who think that that's the real chuppah, which by the way is not the mainstream psak halakha, but nevertheless we're in the age where people want to fulfill their obligation to all the shitot, all the deyot, so they insist that two witnesses will be there at the time of the Badeken. I'm sure you have seen Rabbanim who have looked for the two Eidim at the time of the Badeken to verify the chuppah status of the covering of the kala. Now, the Rav Zichron Lebracha was not makbid. He was not makbid that there had to be two witnesses at the chuppahs, at the badeken, which meant that he did not accept the notion that the badeken was really the chuppah, but the chuppah really was the chuppah, or better yet, the yichud was really the chuppah, and that was way afterwards. And there we did have two witnesses. That was very important to have two edim. But to have two edim by the badeken, that's a chuppah. I once heard from Rav Amital Zichron Lebracha, the great Rosh Yeshiva in the Gush, who once commented about the whole inclination to fulfill your obligations according to all of the views, and sometimes they're even contradictory. So that's even a trick. How to do that? He says it's a weakness in being decisive. People who can't be decisive, so they have to just be, And okay, there are some people think that the more shitas the merrier, but then you can just go crazy. You have to take a stand on certain views and stick by it, and that becomes your halacha lema'aseh. So you have here about Adei Chuppah v'Kiddushin. I'm just going to wrap it up with perhaps just another example ba'al peh of this business of the Rambam and Nusach Ashkenaz. Just going to whip through. Yeah, I wanted to say something about Kiddush Levana. So Kiddush Levana, as the Rambam has the bracha in source number 8 of Kiddush Levana, it says Haro'eh Levana b'chidusha. If you see the new moon, when it's new moon. When does the new moon become a new moon? After Rosh Chodesh, right? So at Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh, we have Birkat HaChodesh, and the Gabbai announces the Molad. Gabbai announces the Molad, when the new moon is going to be born. Sad, announces the Molad. Most people don't pay attention to it. It doesn't mean anything to us, right? It's going to be, the Molad is going to be on Yom Revi, on Wednesday. There's some people who think that the moon only understands Yiddish. I have heard Molads announced here in Israel. Everything is said in Hebrew, or English for that matter, in the shul, but the moiled is in Yiddish. Why? Because the grandfather used to say a moiled in Yiddish. The moiled ved zayin. The moiled is going to be. The moiled, the moon doesn't understand any language. You can say it in whatever language you want, and all you have to do is Torah tidbits, you get the moiled. It's printed there every once a month. Fine. So the molad means when the first possibility of the appearance of the new moon. So in theory, if the two witnesses would be out there waiting to see the new moon so they can report it immediately to the Beit Din, so you have to know when the moiled is. The custom is that we wait until at least after the third day of Rosh Chodesh to say Kiddush Levana, because then you're absolutely sure it's the new moon. If it's on Rosh Chodesh itself, well, maybe it's the day before. You're not sure. Well, today we are sure because we have calendars. But in the days of old, when the calendars weren't so widespread, you could erroneously say Kiddush Levana on the 29th or 30th day of the previous month, and not on the 1st of the next month. So people have accustomed themselves to wait 3 days, and the Kabbalists waited 7 days. So, and then another minute kicked in. You know when a good time to say Kiddush Levana? Right after Shabbat. Right after Shabbat. So Motzei Shabbat. Why? Because people are besimcha and there's Kabbalat Pnei Ashkenaz. It says clearly in one of the sections in the SIDDUR, lifted out of Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Mem Bet, it says you have to say Kiddush Levana standing up because it's like receiving Kadosh Baruch Hu's presence by doing Kiddush Levana. And after Shabbos, you're in a good spirit for doing this, and you have a minyan coming out of shul. You don't have to have a minyan for Kiddush Levana, but it's nice if there's a minyan. So they'll delay it. The only time it's not good to delay if it's in the winter months, because maybe Motzei Shabbos it's going to be cloudy, and you're never going to see a moon. Okay, so let's wait till Sunday, Monday. If the 7th of the month is Friday and it's the 8th of the month, it's a gamble to start waiting. So I prefer for sure the earlier minhag. Not the non-Kabbalistic minhag, which is by the end of the third of the month, or really 3 days after the Moiled. So it can already be on the third, because many times the Moiled is like kind of a day before Aleph. That's something else. But I'm just going to cue you into a little personal thing. People sometimes have a connection to a particular mitzvah, and I'm hooked on Kiddush Levana. I mean, literally hooked on Kiddush Levana because of a personal incident that I have several years ago when I had a slipped disc and I wasn't able to walk properly for about 2-3 weeks. And what turned it around was I turned a corner from my house where there's a drugstore. I had to pick up steroids. And it takes me normally 3 minutes, that's when I walk slowly, to the drugstore. And this took me 45 minutes to turn the corner. Every step was very painful. And I turned the corner and I saw the moon. And I hadn't said Kiddush Levana yet that month. I took out my phone, I said Kiddush Levana, and I realized what this is all about. It's hitchadshut, it's renewal. It gives you a shot in the arm that things have to be better. And I was able to walk home properly. It still was difficult, but I realized I've bottomed out. I've bottomed out. It was a game changer. That Kiddush Levana. And I said, I'm going to be the first one in Eretz Yisrael to say Kiddush Levana. And that's why the Rambam doesn't know from day 7 nor day 3. The Rambam says, B'chidusha. The minute you know it's the new moon, say Kiddush Levana. So I have personally defied the minhag, and even on the first, if I can, say Kiddush Levana. I snap a photo, and I send it to my family, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. It's the first one in the world to say Kiddush Levana. I have a love affair with Kiddush Levana. I don't know why. We were once driving in Ramot, and my wife can testify this, and I hadn't said Kiddush Levana yet for whatever reason, either because it was cloudy, whatever. Driving down Rehov Harry Truman in Ramot Aleph, and I saw the moon. I pulled over to the side, jumped out of the car. My wife thought it was an emergency. I said it was. I had to say Kiddush Levana. She thought I was out of my mind. But this is, and that's why the only time I delay Kiddush Levana, by the way, is when I'm in Chutz La'aretz and I see the new moon, because I know if I'm going to be back in Eretz Yisrael before the 15th of the month, which is the last time zone to say Kiddush Levana, I will prefer to say Kiddush Levana in Eretz Yisrael than to say it al admat nechar, and that's the only time I will delay it. That's all. Okay, next week, for those who didn't hear the announcement at the beginning, next 2 weeks, I will be in Chutz La'aretz. I will not say Kiddush Levana in Chutz La'aretz, Mirz Hashem. I will be back in Eretz Yisrael right after Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni, and I'll be able to say Kiddush Levana here. So there will be a pinch hitter or a substitute. There will be in the Torah tidbits, who, what, when. But in 3 weeks from today, Mirz Hashem, we will resume. Kol Tov.